Before we begin, if you enjoy cinematic sci-fi where humanity surprises the galaxy, tap like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach farther than any jump gate. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Its ceiling curved into infinity, a simulated firmament threaded with the light of 1,000 conquered stars. At the center, a ring of hovering thrones held the representatives of the dominant species of known space. They had gathered here to decide the fate of monsters, and in doing so revealed their own. Confirm the designation, intoned High Arbiter Vrel, his voice layered with synthetic harmonics meant to project authority across species boundaries. The projection bloomed to life. A colossal silhouette filled the chamber, all jagged mass and predatory geometry. Even as a hologram, it seemed to bend attention around itself like gravity learning how to hate. Apex Predator, the archivist replied. Class Omega No. Last confirmed sighting resulted in the sterilization of the Yothra expanse. Estimated casualties, 6 trillion. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Fear sharpened into resentment by memory. These things do not coexist, Vrel said. They end. Another image replaced the first. This one showed a quiet frontier world. Sparse vegetation. Thin atmosphere. Hardly worth cataloging. And yet, the archivist continued, this apex is stationary. No planetary consumption. No expansion behavior. It has remained within a 20-kilometer radius for 11 standard cycles. Lying in wait, spat one of the counselors. Possibly wounded, offered another. Or breeding, said Vrel, and the word carried enough venom to silence the chamber. The archivist hesitated, then brought up the final image. A heat signature smaller than the others. Fragile. Human. There is a sapient juvenile within the apex's territory, the archivist said carefully. Species human. Age estimate, 7 cycles. The council reacted as one. Dismissive laughter from some. Irritation from others. Humans. Vrel said. They barely register on the threat index. Primitive emotional attachments. Poor strategic cohesion. Collateral, another counselor added. Acceptable. Vrel's mandibles flexed in what passed for a smile. Then the solution is obvious. We do not risk council fleets. We hire professionals. The image shifted again, this time to a dossier of hardened figures. Galactic mercenaries. Killers who sold certainty to fearful governments. Authorize the contract, Vrel said. Extermination only. No survivors. Light years away, the sky over the frontier world was the color of old steel. Elias Ward noticed the change before the sensors did. He had learned to read the planet the way sailors once read clouds. The air tasted sharper. The wind hesitated, as if unsure which direction to flee. Elias stood outside the settlement's perimeter, one hand resting on the worn grip of his rifle, the other shading his eyes as he stared upward. Something's wrong, he muttered. Behind him, the small habitat dome hummed with life support and fragile normalcy. Inside were a handful of settlers who had gambled everything on a world no one else wanted. Among them was Noah. Elias turned back toward the dome, his steps quickening. He didn't like leaving the boy alone, not after everything that had happened. He found Noah where he always was, seated near the reinforced viewport, legs tucked beneath him, drawing shapes in the condensation on the glass. The child looked up and smiled, a soft, unguarded expression that still surprised Elias every time. You see it too? Noah asked. Elias frowned. See what? Noah pointed beyond the dome, toward the jagged rock formations that marked the edge of the forbidden zone. He's awake. Elias followed the gesture, his throat tightening. Even now, weeks later, the knowledge of what lived out there sat heavy in his chest. They called it a monster. The first time Elias had seen it, he had believed that too. He remembered the ground shaking, the shadow swallowing half the horizon, the way every survival instinct he had ever known had screamed at him to run. Instead he had frozen. And Noah had stepped forward. Elias closed his eyes briefly, the memory still raw. He's not a he, Elias said quietly. Not like us. Noah shrugged. He listens. As if summoned by the words, the ground outside trembled, not with violence but with weight. A presence announced itself, careful despite its enormity. Through the viewport, Elias watched the apex predator emerge from behind the rocks. It was vast beyond comprehension, its body a living architecture of muscle and armor, scarred with wounds that glowed faintly beneath its hide. Each movement carried restraint, a deliberate gentleness that defied everything the galaxy believed about its kind. The apex lowered itself, massive head angling toward the dome. One eye, larger than the habitat's main door, fixed on the window. On Noah. The child stood and pressed his palm to the glass. "They're coming," he said with the simple certainty of someone stating the weather. Elias felt the cold settle into his bones. "Who's coming?" Noah didn't answer. He didn't need to. High above the planet, far beyond unaided sight, space folded inward as unfamiliar ships slipped into real space. Their hulls bore no flags, no colors of allegiance. Only weapons and the confidence of those paid to use them. Inside the dome, Elias keyed the emergency channel, his jaw set. Outside, the apex shifted, placing its massive form between the settlement and the sky. For the first time since humanity had left its cradle, the galaxy's deadliest predator was not hunting. It was standing guard. Elias had learned to live with uncertainty, but the arrival of the apex had reshaped it into a tangible weight. Each morning, he measured the distance between the settlement and the jagged cliffs, where the predator lingered, as though the rocks themselves were part of its domain. The creature did not approach the habitat. It did not intrude. Yet its presence dominated everything. Noah, unconcerned by the enormity outside, treated it like an unremarkable companion. "Why doesn't he attack?" Elias asked one evening, voice low, almost afraid to disturb the still air. Noah's small hands were busy shaping clay into crude models of spaceships and monsters, but his eyes were fixed on the shadows beyond the dome. "He's not like the others," the child said. "He listens, and he waits." Elias crouched beside him, trying to reconcile what he saw with the legends that haunted council archives. Apex predators were extinction machines, designed by evolution to annihilate everything in their path. Yet here was one, patient and measured, its attention fixed entirely on the boy. Elias could feel the contradiction pressing against his chest, a force heavier than any gravity he had known. The predator shifted. Its limbs, larger than any vehicle Elias had ever operated, flexed without sound. Each movement was a study in controlled power, muscles folding like engineered structures, scars tracing the story of countless battles. Elias had no doubt that if the creature wished, it could annihilate the settlement in moments. Instead, it remained a silent sentinel. Elias's concern was not idle. Weeks ago, he had ventured near the cliffs to test the predator's response. Heart-pounding, he had witnessed its awareness in full measure. A subtle tilt of its head, a ripple through its massive frame, and the ground itself seemed to obey its observation. Elias retreated before he could fully comprehend the intellect contained within that hulking form. That night, he resolved to stay within the dome, to shield Noah from risks he could not control. Noah, however, had different instincts. He thrived in curiosity, fearless in ways that Elias found simultaneously inspiring and terrifying. The child had wandered close to the cliffs once, drawn by the shifting light and shadows, and the predator had followed without aggression, maintaining a protective distance. That singular moment had crystallized Elias's understanding. This was no mere animal. It had chosen to guard, and the choice was directed at humanity, or at least at the child before him. Elias worked tirelessly, reinforcing the habitat, setting perimeter sensors, and monitoring external activity. He was a sentinel in his own right, yet the predator overshadowed every effort. Where Elias's measures were practical, the apex's presence was absolute. He could not command its attention, nor could he negotiate its loyalty. Yet paradoxically he trusted it implicitly. Each time he scanned the cliffs, the creature was there, watching, ensuring that nothing slipped past the line between the world he controlled and the wilderness he could not. They ate in silence, the hum of the dome punctuated only by Noah's occasional questions. The child's fascination with the predator had grown into routine familiarity. He mimicked its movements when Elias wasn't looking, crouching, tilting, testing distance, imagining himself capable of the strength and precision it embodied. Elias watched, torn between admiration and dread. The bond forming between them was undeniable, but it was fragile, poised against the galaxy's misconceptions and the mercenary threat that he had glimpsed in distant orbital scans. Elias had tried reasoning with the Council's logic, attempting to frame humanity as insignificant in the predator's sphere. He failed spectacularly. The apex's behavior defied their calculations, rendering every argument about danger or control irrelevant. And now he understood the child's innate empathy had catalyzed the connection. Noah's simple, fearless humanity had reached the predator in ways that fleets, weapons, and archives could never hope to. Night fell, and with it came the strange stillness that often preceded the arrival of unknown threats. The predator emerged fully, stepping from the shadows with deliberate, almost ceremonial movement. Its head lowered, aligning its eye with the small figure of Noah. Elias held his breath. He knew this was a test of patience, a silent acknowledgement that Noah's trust was the only bridge between species. The boy reached out instinctively, palm flat against the reinforced glass. The predator mirrored the gesture with its enormous claw, halting inches away, the reflection of its scaled surface rippling in the dome's illumination. Elias exhaled slowly, the tension seeping out of him in measured relief. In that moment, the predator was not a myth, not a weapon, not a threat. It was a guardian, a living fortress whose sole allegiance was to the child's safety. Suddenly, a distant tremor ran through the ground. Elias stiffened, scanning the horizon. Nothing visible, yet the vibration carried a resonance unfamiliar, calculated. Noah tensed too, small shoulders rigid, instinctively bracing for what he could not yet name. Elias's hand found the grip of his rifle, not to threaten, but to anchor himself in the certainty of action. The predator responded as well, lowering its massive frame, muscles coiled, every fiber attuned to the subtle disturbance in the terrain. Elias recognized the signs immediately: approaching ships. Sleek, precise, lethal. Not civilian, not scouts, mercenaries. Their presence explained the tremor, the faint distortion in the atmospheric readings. He could imagine them now, hardened killers sold to the highest bidder, their confidence born of lives extinguished without thought. The apex sensed them too. Its body shifted, a tower of raw power and careful grace, moving to intercept a threat before it even emerged from the horizon. Noah's voice broke the silence, soft but unshakable. "They'll see him," he said. Elias met the child's gaze, the fear and recognition mirrored there. The predator's watchful stance remained unchanged, but Elias understood its awareness ran deeper than human comprehension. This was not the moment for panic. This was the moment for strategy, for respect of a power that eclipsed both fear and reason. The child and the creature shared a glance, a silent covenant forming in that shared instant. Elias realized fully that their bond would define the next hours, days, perhaps years. The galaxy's finest hunters would arrive expecting a monster. What they would find instead was a force that the Council could not predict, one that recognized value, empathy, and loyalty in ways no data array could quantify. Elias tightened his grip, feeling the weight of responsibility settle like armor. Noah returned to the window, small hand pressed to the glass, eyes unwavering. Outside, the predator remained, a sentinel in shadow, prepared to do what Elias could not imagine yet needed to trust. And above the cliffs, unseen and far, the first shimmer of approaching ships reflected the Council's deadly certainty. Elias inhaled, centering himself. He had no choice but to defend the child. Yet he also knew something extraordinary: they were not alone, and the force arrayed before them was nothing like the galaxy had been taught to fear. It was something new, and it was listening. Elias crouched low behind the reinforced perimeter wall, scanning the horizon through the high-resolution scope. The tremor beneath his feet had grown stronger, subtle vibrations now accompanied by the faint shimmer of engines slicing through the thin atmosphere. Mercenaries. He had seen their kind before, precise, efficient, and lethal without hesitation. Their reputation alone was enough to make seasoned soldiers reconsider, but here, on this isolated planet, Elias felt the full weight of their inevitability. Noah remained inside, seated on the floor by the viewport, drawing shapes in the condensation. Elias's eyes flicked to the child, heart tightening. Noah had watched the predator as if it were part of his daily routine, and yet now, he sensed the incoming danger as sharply as any seasoned scout. He was small but perceptive, humanity distilled to its finest instinct. Elias had to trust that intuition, even as his mind raced with defensive strategies he had no way to implement fully. The first scout ships appeared as glints on the horizon, sleek silhouettes skimming just above the rocky terrain. They were unmarked, their metallic surfaces reflecting starlight in a cold, calculating shimmer. Elias counted 6, formation precise, engines silent to untrained ears but unmistakable to anyone who had studied movement in empty space. He could imagine their pilots now, grinning beneath helmets that concealed nothing but intent. They had been hired for a single purpose: kill. Apex predator, human collateral, no mistakes tolerated. Elias whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else: "Stay calm. Watch. Learn." He had no illusions of fighting them head-on. He could delay, divert, maybe confuse, but not win. Victory would come from strategy, from understanding the one variable no mercenary, no council archive, no scanner could predict: the predator itself. From the cliffs the apex emerged. Its shadow stretched across the jagged rocks, moving with the quiet deliberation of a storm rolling in. Elias watched, fascinated and terrified, as the predator's massive claws pressed into the ground, the weight of its presence bending the terrain slightly with each deliberate step. Its gaze swept the horizon, taking in the approaching ships, calculating, assessing. Elias could feel the intelligence radiating off it, sharp and alive, a predator aware of all variables yet choosing restraint. The scout ships adjusted their approach, sensing resistance in the form of this enormous guardian. Their movements became cautious, tactical, precision now tempered with hesitation. Elias noted the subtle shifts in formation. They had expected an unthinking monster, a rampaging force to be suppressed by firepower. They had not anticipated judgment, deliberation, strategy. The apex predator's presence alone began to warp the battlefield before a single shot was fired. Inside the dome, Noah rose and approached the window. "He's not going to let them pass," the boy said, voice calm, matter-of-fact. Elias had learned not to correct Noah. The child observed patterns adults often missed, intuitions honed by a mixture of innocence and courage. He pressed a hand to the glass as though sending reassurance, and Elias realized the predator seemed to recognize that gesture, pausing momentarily as if acknowledging it. The mercenaries responded. One ship swooped closer, its pilot clearly attempting to gauge the predator's reach, to test the reaction of the creature it had been hired to destroy. The apex tilted its massive head, eyeing the vessel with almost playful precision. Then it moved. Not to attack but to assert. The ground quaked as it advanced, claws scraping rocks, muscles coiling and releasing in perfect rhythm. The ship's sensors pinged in warning. This was no mindless beast. Elias's pulse raced. He keyed a communication channel, hoping the mercenaries had open frequencies. "This is Ward. You do not understand what you are approaching," he said, voice steady. The scope captured the predator's massive form shifting, positioning itself directly between the dome and the scouts. The child remained still, eyes wide, understanding and calm, embodying the strange courage humans displayed when faced with impossible odds. Static filled the channel, then a clipped, professional voice responded. "Ward, step aside. Orders are clear. Apex predator must be neutralized. Civilian casualties are secondary but acknowledged." Elias's jaw tightened. Secondary. That single word carried the weight of the council's arrogance. They had made calculations without seeing, decisions without observing, treaties without understanding. And here, on this overlooked planet, those assumptions were about to unravel. A warning blast from the lead ship shattered the horizon. It was not aimed at the dome, not yet, but it was a message, precise and cold. The apex responded without hesitation. Massive limbs struck the rocky ground, sending clouds of dust into the thin air, a subtle but undeniable display of power. The scout ship faltered in its approach, navigating a terrain suddenly made hostile by the predator's presence. Elias realized the creature was using terrain as an extension of itself, reshaping the battlefield without a single weapon. Noah watched, unblinking, as the predator coiled, preparing to act. He understood instinctively what Elias could only admire from a distance. The apex would not kill recklessly. It would neutralize threat, control outcomes and protect those under its care. Elias felt a surge of awe. The council's monster was something else entirely. A guardian, a strategist and a force that recognized the human child as more than prey or collateral. The mercenaries hesitated, exchanging signals. They had entered expecting unthinking aggression, and now they confronted intelligence layered over unimaginable strength. One pilot whispered something in a foreign tongue, another adjusted trajectory, a third checked weapon systems again. Elias could see the conflict in their formation. Orders versus reality, fear versus protocol. From the cliffs, the predator flexed, muscles rippling, tail coiling with precise control. It shifted its massive frame forward, not charging, not striking, but drawing an invisible line. Beyond this boundary, no threat would pass. Within it, the child and Elias were safe. The mercenaries were outsiders in a domain they had no claim to, yet their presence was imminent. Elias exhaled slowly, recognizing the beginning of a confrontation defined not by firepower alone, but by understanding, timing and instincts far beyond human measure. The ships paused on the edge of the predator's influence, engines humming with uncertainty. Elias keyed his channel again, voice low and commanding. "Stop. You are not ready for this." Static filled the air, the reply delayed, tense. And then, beyond the cliffs, a subtle vibration, a warning, a signal, a promise, rolled through the ground. The apex had decided. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was no longer just about survival. It was about revelation. The galaxy's deadliest hunter was not mindless, and the child it guarded was no ordinary human. Everything that had been assumed about power, control, and danger was about to be tested. Elias glanced at Noah, who looked back with quiet certainty, then to the Predator, poised like a living fortress. The first act of the standoff had begun, and neither mercy nor death had yet been claimed, but the outcome would redefine every expectation the galaxy held. The horizon shimmered with movement, the Predator's silhouette unyielding, and Elias understood with absolute clarity. The hunters had walked into a battlefield they did not know how to read, and the war for the child's survival, and for respect between species, was about to erupt. Elias watched the mercenaries hover at the edge of the Predator's influence, engines humming with restrained caution. Their formation wavered as if the apex's presence distorted not only the terrain but their confidence. He could feel it in his bones. These were professionals trained for certainty, and yet they hesitated in ways he had never seen. The Predator did not move aggressively. It did not roar or strike. It simply existed, colossal and poised, a living declaration that some things in the universe were not to be bargained with. Noah crouched beside him, whispering, "He knows what they mean. He can feel it." Elias swallowed, realizing the truth in the child's words. The apex species did not need words. Their cognition extended beyond language into intent, into emotion, into the very calculus of survival and loyalty. Noah had reached out instinctively, guided by a natural empathy humans carried, a rare gift that transcended species boundaries. Elias had once thought the Predator's attention was curiosity, now he understood it was judgment. The first mercenary vessel moved forward, scanning, testing, attempting to provoke. Its sensors pinged against the Predator's mass, mapping muscle, scar tissue, even subtle signs of intelligence. Elias could almost hear the Predator's response as a ripple of tension through the ground, a subtle warning that echoed louder than any weapon. The apex shifted slightly, a calculated adjustment of weight and position, signaling clearly, "Cross this boundary and you will face consequences." Elias keyed his comms again, voice tight but firm. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Step back. Leave." There was silence, broken only by the hum of engines and the soft creak of the settlement structure. The mercenaries had received clear orders, yet instinct or perhaps fear tugged at them. They had been briefed on lethality, trained to ignore uncertainty, yet uncertainty had arrived in the form of a creature that refused their assumptions. Noah, small and resolute, pressed his palm to the viewport, as though speaking directly to the Predator. Elias felt the bond in that gesture, fragile yet unbreakable. The child's courage was tangible, a human defiance that amplified the Predator's own protective instincts. Elias realized that the apex was not guarding a human by accident. It had chosen, recognized, and committed to Noah in a way no calculation could predict. From the cliffs, the Predator lowered its massive head, eyeing the approaching mercenaries. The movement was deliberate, not threatening but absolute. Every sinew flexed, a language of power and discipline. Elias could see the mercenary pilots tense, instruments recording muscle fiber density, reaction time, and weight distribution, yet none could anticipate the decisions embedded in that massive intellect. The Predator's intent was clear: harm none within its boundary, destroy any threat that breached it. Elias stepped closer to Noah, voice steadying, "It sees you not just as a child but as something worth protecting." The boy nodded, eyes wide but calm. Elias had never seen a human and non-human bond like this, an understanding that did not require speech, a mutual recognition of responsibility and trust. And yet, he knew the galaxy outside this planet would never understand. The mercenaries conferred, their movements subtle but telling. Communication was brief, coded, and precise. One attempted a direct approach, calculating distance and velocity against projected reactions of the apex. Elias felt his pulse quicken. He knew that any misstep would trigger violence. Yet he also knew that the Predator was calculating not only force but morality. It had the capacity to kill without hesitation, but it had chosen restraint repeatedly. Noah whispered, "He knows I'm not afraid. That's why he stays." Elias didn't respond, merely nodded inwardly. Fear had always been a guide for humans, but this child had discovered something more: empathy as strategy, courage as currency. The Predator had sensed it instantly, and their alliance had formed in that unspoken recognition. The lead mercenary vessel faltered. Elias noticed it immediately, the trajectory altering slightly, hesitation creeping into the rigid discipline of trained killers. The Predator had communicated through presence, posture, and intent, a silent language the mercenaries had no frame of reference for. Elias realized that this was the moment the galaxy would later call improbable. Humanity's survival had never been guaranteed by strength alone. It had been guaranteed by insight, by connection, by something the Apex had recognized before any counselor or fleet commander could. Elias keyed the emergency channel again. "I'm warning you. Step back. You cannot predict him. You will fail." Static hissed, a mercenary voice replying in clipped tones, hesitant, unfamiliar. There was no fear in the predator, only measured awareness. It shifted, covering more ground, its presence expanding like a gravitational field bending reality around the settlement. Elias felt the ground tremble beneath him, a subtle prelude to power held in careful suspension. Noah leaned against the viewport, eyes tracking the predator's every movement. "He's not just protecting me," the child said softly. "He's protecting us, all of us here." Elias's chest tightened. That single observation contained more wisdom than the Council's entire archive. The predator's choice was moral as much as physical. It had assessed worth, capability, and intent, and had elected protection over destruction. Humanity in this child had passed a test that no species had attempted before. The mercenaries paused again, their formation disrupted by hesitation. Elias could almost see their internal calculations spinning against reality. Their orders were clear, yet the Apex defied predictability at every turn. Elias recognized that their success depended not on firepower, but on understanding, a currency they had never been taught to value. The predator shifted once more, lowering its head, letting its massive bulk cast a shadow over the settlement. Its gaze lingered on Noah, affirming, acknowledging, pledging. Elias felt a profound sense of relief and awe. The galaxy had sent killers expecting carnage. Instead, they faced a force beyond comprehension. Disciplined, intelligent, moral, and absolute. Noah pressed his hand again to the glass, whispering, "You can't take him from me." Elias smiled faintly, understanding. The predator had made its decision and in doing so had redefined what humans, and the galaxy, believed about power and guardianship. Above the cliffs, the lead mercenary vessel hovered, engines humming uncertainly, sensors unable to fully parse the Apex's intent. Elias realized the standoff was more than survival, it was revelation. The Apex had judged humanity through the child, and the result was not destruction but alliance. The galaxy's deadliest hunter had recognized something worth saving, and in doing so, Elias understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The predator lowered its massive frame to a coiled stance, signaling readiness but not aggression. Elias gripped the edge of the viewport, eyes locked on the creature, and understood. The next moves were not dictated by weapons or orders but by choice. The Apex had chosen humanity. And now, everyone watching, the mercenaries, the Council, and the universe itself, would have to reckon with a truth no archive could contain. Empathy, courage, and understanding could be mightier than fleets, and loyalty could come from the unlikeliest of sources. The horizon trembled faintly as the mercenaries hesitated again, engines quivering. Elias exhaled slowly, heart steadying. Noah's small hand rested on the glass, unwavering. The predator remained a colossus of restraint and power. Elias knew that the galaxy would soon realize that it had miscalculated entirely, and that humanity's place in the universe was far more formidable than anyone had dared to imagine. The first shot broke the silence. It was precise, a warning flare fired to test the predator's reaction. Elias felt it in his chest before he saw it, a tremor that traveled through the ground, carried on the apex predator's awareness as if the planet itself had shifted. Noah ducked instinctively, but the creature moved first, massive claws digging into stone, sending dust and debris into the thin air. The flare never reached the dome. The apex had intercepted it without a sound, without hesitation. A single, calculated motion that displaced tons of rock and shattered the mercenaries' assumptions. Elias's heart raced, not with fear but with recognition. This was not mindless aggression. This was judgment, precision, and absolute control. The predator had chosen a threshold, and anything crossing it would be met with consequences designed for survival, not spectacle. Noah pressed close to Elias, small hand gripping his arm, eyes wide with calm certainty. He understood instinctively what Elias could only admire from the edges of human perception. The apex would fight with strategy, not rage. The mercenary vessels faltered, engines straining against the planet's gravity and the unseen presence dominating the battlefield. Elias could see the calculations running through their minds. Speed versus impact, weapon yield versus the predator's mass, risk analysis versus protocol. They had been trained for certainty, for calculated elimination. Yet here the equations failed. The apex was not predictable, not programmable, not an opponent to be conquered with conventional tactics. A second shot fired, closer this time, targeting a ridge where the predator had shifted its weight. Elias ducked instinctively, hearing the hiss of plasma dissipating harmlessly against the ground. The predator's eye tracked the projectile with deliberate intent, then it moved. The motion was subtle yet overwhelming, limbs folding, tail coiling, claws striking the rocks in precise arcs. A shockwave rippled outward, unbalancing the nearest vessel, sending it skidding and forcing a sudden retreat. Elias exhaled slowly. The apex's response was surgical, controlled, lethal in theory but restrained in practice. Noah pressed his palm to the glass, murmuring, "He knows we're here. He knows we can't fight them alone." Elias nodded, understanding fully. Humanity alone could not confront this threat, but with the predator as an ally, they had a force the Council and Mercenaries could not anticipate. The child's courage and empathy had forged a bond stronger than fleets or weaponry. Elias realized that Noah's small hand, resting on the viewport, symbolized a bridge between species, a trust and understanding no council had ever factored into their equations. The apex shifted again, towering above the rocks, limbs coiled like loaded springs. Its gaze swept across the horizon, assessing each mercenary, each vessel, each possible path of approach. Elias felt a thrill of awe mixed with fear. The predator was aware of everything, every nuance, every subtle variation in terrain and energy signature. It was as if the planet itself had become an extension of the creature, responding to its thoughts and will. Elias keyed the emergency channel one last time. "I warn you. Any further approach will be met with total force. Stand down." There was hesitation on the other side, static, whispers. The mercenaries had expected a beast to crush and flee, to fight or die without calculation. They had not anticipated intelligence, morality, and precision. The apex's presence alone unsettled them, undermined the certainty that had been their only weapon. From the cliffs, the predator moved, a massive silhouette against the dim starlight. It descended closer to the dome, muscles coiling and releasing with hypnotic rhythm, claws shifting stones with silent authority. Elias felt the energy of the moment, the absolute certainty that this being had made a choice. Protection, not revenge, judgment, not instinct. Noah stood at the window, small and defiant, pressing against the glass with unshakable faith. Elias had never seen human courage mirrored in such a bond between species. The mercenaries exchanged tense signals, their formation cracking under the pressure of unpredictability. Engines hummed nervously as the lead vessel hesitated, calculating whether a breach of the predator's boundary was worth the risk. Elias knew that hesitation would grow into indecision, indecision into retreat. The apex had already won without striking, simply by existing with intent and precision. Then the predator acted. It did not charge recklessly. It did not roar or fire indiscriminately. Its massive limbs struck with deliberate control, toppling boulders, creating barriers, sending shockwaves through the terrain that forced the closest mercenary vessels to pull back. The energy from its movement rippled outward, a combination of brute force and strategic placement that neutralized every immediate threat without harming the settlement. Elias watched, awestruck, as the predator established a living perimeter, its body a fortress, its mind a calculation no machine could match. Noah laughed softly, pure and unafraid, and pressed again to the glass. "He's not just strong. He's smart. He knows who matters." Elias smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity's place in the galaxy had never been measured by fleets, weapons, or numbers. It had been measured by courage, empathy, and connection. And in this child, the apex had recognized those qualities and chosen them as a standard worth defending. The mercenaries retreated, engines flaring in abrupt maneuvers, scanning instruments useless against a strategy that could not be predicted. Elias realized with clarity that this encounter would redefine their understanding of power. They had come expecting slaughter. Instead, they faced a force governed by morality, loyalty, and intelligence, traits that even the most sophisticated warships could not anticipate. The predator lowered itself beside the dome, a protective shadow over Noah. Elias approached cautiously, heart hammering. The creature's massive head tilted slightly, acknowledging him not as prey, not as inferior, but as partner in this fragile alliance. Noah's small hand rested against the predator's claw, their connection complete. Elias understood fully that the galaxy's deadliest hunter had chosen them not by chance but by recognition, by judgment, by the rare ability to see value in what others dismissed. Above the cliffs, the night sky shimmered as the remaining mercenary ships retreated, leaving behind the quiet hum of engines and unspoken understanding. They had underestimated everything. Elias exhaled, relief and awe mingling in a single, steady breath. The Predator remained coiled, watchful, a silent guardian whose allegiance had been earned through instinct and choice. Noah turned to Elias, eyes bright with certainty. "They won't take him. Not ever." Elias nodded, realizing the truth in that small, simple declaration. Humanity had survived, not through power, not through cunning, but through the unlikeliest of alliances: the trust of a child, the judgment of a predator, and the courage to stand between them. The apex shifted, towering and silent, and Elias felt the enormity of the moment. The galaxy would eventually learn, through rumor and legend, that the creature it feared most had been tamed not by force, but by understanding. Humanity had earned guardianship in the unlikeliest of ways, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the planet settled into quiet once more, Elias and Noah stood at the viewport, watching the Predator coiled in eternal vigilance. The horizon was free of immediate threats, but the resonance of the encounter lingered. Elias understood fully that the battle was not just survival, it was revelation. Humanity, fragile and underestimated, had earned the respect of a being the galaxy had feared. And together they had rewritten the rules of power.